Able now.
Okay, ma'am. Yes, students, good morning, all of you. Please look at the screen. I'm giving you the important points for the revision of the chapter. First chapter, A Triumph of Surgery, in your book, Footprints Without Feet. We have important points of the story here. After that, we'll have discussion. If you have any problem, you can ask your questions. In the story, we see Dr. Harriet, who is the narrator of the story. He was really worried to see the dog Tricky. There was a dog in the story, and he was very much worried to see the dog because he was very fat, his eyes were red and rheumy. And Mrs. Pumphrey, who was the mistress of the dog Tricky, had been giving him malt, cod liver oil, and a bowl of Horlicks every night. बहुत अच्छी उसको वो डाइट देती थी so that he could be good in health. Dr. Harriet found that the only fault of Tricky was his greed for food, and the dog was also becoming greedy. Daily he was getting so many things for eating, और उसको भी जो भी चीज़ मिलती वो खा जाता था. So he was getting fatty. The doctor advised Mrs. Pumphrey to cut down his food rightly and give him exercise daily. When she consulted the doctor because the dog was becoming very lazy, and the doctor advised her to cut down the food rightly and give him exercise daily कि उसका food जो है वो खाना कम कर दो और उसको daily exercise दी जाए. Within a few days, the doctor received a call from Mrs. Pumphrey, but there was no effect because she herself was not able to control her attachment and her emotional feeling with the dog. That's why she was still giving her a lot of food. But when the problem was not solved, she again gave a call to the doctor. And then what the problem was, now he was becoming very lethargic, very fatty, और overeating की वजह से उसका मन जो था खाने को नहीं करता था. He was not feeling well. घबराहट हो रही थी उसको, जैसे वॉमिटिंग फील हो रही है, ऐसी फीलिंग. जब हमारा भी ओवर ईटिंग हो जाता है तो ऐसी प्रॉब्लम भी फील करते हैं ना कि हमारा मन नहीं करता कुछ भी खाने को. सो द सेम वाज विद दैट डॉग. The dog was not eating anything and was vomiting again and again. He lay down panting and did not go for a walk. वो आराम से चुपचाप सुस्त सा बनकर लेटा रहता और वॉक के लिए भी नहीं जाता था. Dr. Harriet suggested Mrs. Pumphrey that Tricky must be hospitalized for about a fortnight. तो डॉक्टर ने क्या सलाह दी कि उसको फोर्टनाइट के लिए, दैट मीन्स 15 days के लिए उसको हॉस्पिटलाइज कर दिया जाए, so that treatment should be done. The poor lady almost fainted, but at last Tricky was taken to the hospital. Poor lady here, not poor in the context of money, it is emotional touch given with the dog. She was very much attached to the dog and she did not want to be separate from the dog, कि उसको हॉस्पिटल में भेज दे और वो घर रहे. तो क्या हुआ, she could not tolerate this thing and she got fainted, almost fainted, मतलब बेहोशी की हालत में थी, जैसे कि उसका मन नहीं कर रहा था कि डॉग को भेजा जाए. But at last she had to send the dog to the hospital. At the surgery, what happened, the doctor took him to his hospital, and the household dogs surged around Dr. Harriet, and Tricky looked silently at them lying motionless on the carpet. And when he reached in that hospital, surgery here referred to the hospital premises, not the operation theater. There were other dogs also which were kept there. So all the dogs were just roaming around Dr. Harriet, and Tricky was just looking at them motionless. For 2 days, Dr. Harriet kept an eye on Tricky and gave him no food, but plenty of water. For 2 days, he kept on watching his activities and did not give him anything to eat. Only he gave him plenty of water. Next day, the doctor was pleased to see Tricky jostling his way to his food bowl. और नेक्स्ट डे उसने क्या देखा, कि जब बाकी सारे डॉग्स को खाना दिया जाता था तो पहले तो 2 दिन वो चुपचाप उनको देखता रहा, ही वाज नॉट टेकिंग एनीथिंग, ही वाज नॉट स्ट्रगलिंग विद देम। लेकिन अगले दिन क्या देखता है डॉक्टर कि वो उन बाकी डॉग्स के साथ जो फूड बाउल रखा गया है उसमें से खाना लेने के लिए उनके साथ जॉसलिंग मीन स्ट्रगलिंग, धक्का मुक्की कर रहा था जैसे। एंड डॉक्टर वाज हैप्पी टू सी दिस कि अपने आप ही उसका खाने को मन हो रहा था और वो स्ट्रगल कर रहा था। No medical treatment was given to Tricky. Doctor did not give any type of treatment, any medicine. Tricky's progress was rapid and he started running about the dogs, joining in their friendly barkings. तो हुआ क्या? After a few days, dog was mixing with the other dogs and he was running with them, doing the exercise, friendly barking. They all were doing all type of activities together. Slowly, he mixed up with the dogs that were there in the hospital. The Dr. Harriet informed Mrs. Pumphrey that Tricky was out of danger and was recovering rapidly. The doctor informed this to the owner of that dog, Mrs. Pumphrey. Mrs. Pumphrey was excited to hear the news and started bringing fresh eggs to build his strength. So Mrs. Pumphrey was very excited because she was very much attached to that dog and she was worried that the dog was not eating anything and a good diet was not given to him. She was so attached that she kept on overfeeding him, and now she became excited and she brought fresh eggs so that the dog could be healthy now and have strength. Even wine and brandy were given to improve Tricky's constitution. कि उसकी और स्ट्रेंथ को, उसकी बोन्स को मजबूत करने के लिए उसने क्या किया, वाइन और ब्रांडी तक जो डॉग के लिए वो वहां पर हॉस्पिटल में उसने पहुंचाई. One day, Dr. Harriet phoned Mrs. Pemfrey that Tricky had recovered and she could take him home. और हो क्या रहा था कि जो भी वो खाना या डाइट की चीज़ें पहुंचा रही थी वो डॉक्टर जो था वो अपने फ्रेंड्स के साथ खुद शेयर कर रहा था. ही वाज एंजॉयिंग ऑल दोज थिंग्स एंड ही वाज नॉट गिविंग टू द डॉग बिकॉज ही न्यू दैट डॉग डिड नॉट नीड इट. उसको ओवर ईटिंग की वजह से ही जो प्रॉब्लम थी, हेल्थ की प्रॉब्लम, अदरवाइज ही वाज नॉट हैविंग एनी प्रॉब्लम. So he was enjoying all those things what Mrs. Pumphrey was giving, and he was of the idea now that Ricky should stay there so that he could take all those things regularly. कि जो डाइट में दे रही थी मिसिस पंफ्रे उसके पास रेगुलरली वो आता रहे. डॉक्टर के मन में भी एक ग्रीड सी आ जाती है, बट ही हैड टू सेंड. लेकिन अपने आप को कंट्रोल करता है और एंजॉय कर लेता है सिर्फ उस अपने टाइम को अपने फ्रेंड्स के साथ. एंड देन he told Mrs. Pumphrey that he is out of danger and she could take him home. Within 2 weeks, Tricky had been transformed into a flexible and hard muscled animal. कि 2 हफ्ते के बीच में ही ट्रिकी जो था वो फिर से एक हार्ड मसल्ड एनिमल के रूप में और फ्लेक्सिबल, मतलब लेजी और लेथार्जिक नहीं था, अब वो एक्टिव होकर फिर से जा रहा था. When he saw his mistress, Mrs. Pumphrey, he leaped and reached to her lap. कि जैसे ही मिसेस पम्फ्रे उसको लेने आती है वो भी जंप करके उसकी गोदी में पहुंच जाता है. मिसेस पम्फ्रे thanked Dr. Harriet. Her eyes were wet and lips trembled. She was very much thankful to Dr. Harriet for improving his condition, and she was having tears in her eyes and her lips were trembling. She called Tricky's recovery a triumph of surgery. तो वो क्या कहती है इस चीज को, ट्रिकी की इस रिकवरी को वो क्या कहती है, ट्रायम्फ ऑफ सर्जरी, कि एक सर्जरी की ये जीत हुई है. सर्जरी यहाँ इट्स नॉट मेंट ओनली फॉर द ऑपरेशन, इट रेफर्स टू द मेडिकल ट्रीटमेंट और द हॉस्पिटलाइजेशन and keeping there what the doctor has done, whatever treatment the doctor has done, it is the victory of that treatment or the hospitalization or the care of the doctor. So in this way we see that it shows great attachment of Mrs. Pumphrey and the dog. Now, in this story, we have main characters. One is Mrs. Pumphrey. She is a fabulous, rich, and resourceful lady with a large number of servants and maids. She is passionately attached to her little pet dogs. You can prove these points. Some points are given in the form of hints only. You can prove these points with the help of the text. As in the first point, you can show when dog was taken to Dr. Harriet for the hospitalization, she gave so many things. उसके सर्दियों के कपड़े, उसके गर्मियों के कपड़े, उसके अलग अलग टाइम के खाने के बर्तन, यूटेंसिल्स वो देती है. एंड ऑल सर्वेंट्स वर ब्रिंगिंग ऑल दोज मटेरियल्स टू पुट इन द दैट कार ऑफ डॉक्टर हैरियट. की जो गाड़ी में वो जा रहा था हॉस्पिटल, उस गाड़ी में कितना सामान उसके साथ रख दिया गया था. And many servants were there who were helping Mrs. Pumphrey for all these work. And then we can see her passionate nature when she met the dog after recovery, and how the dog jumped and quickly reached to his lap. She's much worried about Tricky's miserable condition. उसकी वरी क्या थी, वो बहुत सारा उसको खाने को ला कर देती थी सामान, की उसको वीकनेस हो गई है जिस वजह से वो लेजी हो गया है. The Tricky had become hugely fat and listless. Listless means showing no interest in anything, disinterested. She thinks Tricky to be suffering from malnutrition. उसको लग रहा था कि उसको अभी खाना कम मिल रहा है, अच्छा खाना नहीं मिल रहा. So she starts giving Tricky marred cod liver oil and a bowl of Horlicks every night. The doctor knew that Tricky's only fault was his greed for food. He advises Mrs. Pumphrey to cut down food and sweets for Tricky. For Mrs. Pumphrey, it was difficult because she pampers Tricky like a spoiled child. She just treats dog, the Tricky, as a spoiled child. एक बिगड़ा हुआ बच्चा होता है जैसे, तो पेरेंट्स उसको बार बार पैम्पर करते हैं. वो कहता मैंने नहीं ये खाना, तो पेरेंट्स उसको जबरदस्ती करते हैं, नहीं तो ये खा ले, ये नहीं खाना तो वो खा ले. मतलब इस तरीके से पैम्परिंग ऑफ अ चाइल्ड. दैट, you know, the theme of your chapter is also. Mrs. Pamphray is impractical but very compassionate and caring. She's not practical. She does not understand that it is only due to the overeating that the dog was suffering. She and her staff arranges all comforts, beds, cushions, and toys for Tricky. She constantly inquires about his health from Dr. Harriet. She gratefully thanks Dr. Harriet for saving Tricky's life and calls it a triumph of surgery. These are the good qualities of Mrs. Pamphray also, that she was very much thankful to the doctor. She was worried about the health of Tricky and kept on inquiring again and again when he was in the hospital. Then the second important character is dog Tricky. And you know, he's a small dog. The only fault of Tricky is his greed for food. Overfeeding of sweets, cakes, and chocolates make Tricky hugely fat. He becomes rheumy and listless. His tongue lolls from his jaws. The doctor advises Mrs. Pumphrey to keep Tricky on a very strict diet and give him plenty of exercise. Tricky becomes a victim of overindulgence and overfeeding. Dr. Harriet's instructions are ignored, and Tricky loses appetite and starts vomiting. Dr. Harriet suggests Mrs. Pumphrey that Tricky should be hospitalized under his observation for a fortnight. So Tricky's recovery is amazingly rapid. He is not given food but plenty of water. After a few days, Tricky starts taking interest in his surroundings, and he is transformed into a flexible and hard muscled dog. So Tricky shows his love for his mistress by jumping onto her lap when she comes to collect him. Then the third character is Dr. James Harriet, who is no doubt a competent veterinary surgeon. Is really worried about Tricky. He understands that the real fault of the dog is his greed for food. Dr. Harriet instructs Mrs. Pumphrey to keep Tricky on a very strict diet, and Dr. James Harriet is practical and pragmatic. He knew the actual problem. He does not give any medical treatment to the dog. He feeds the dog with only water. His methods work, and the grateful mistress thanks Dr. Harriet and calls his fiat a triumph of surgery. So Dr. James is clever enough to enjoy the best of both the worlds. He is tempted to keep Tricky as a permanent guest, क्योंकि उसको खाने को मिल रहा था अच्छा अच्छा, तो वो इस चीज़ की ग्रीड में भी आ जाता है कि वो एक परमानेंट उसका गेस्ट बन जाए, सो दैट ही कुड गेट द गुड डाइट एवरी डे. It was a happy period for Dr. Harriet and his friends. He used to enjoy eggs for breakfast and wine and brandy for lunch. So in this way, you have seen all the three characters. There is a little introduction about the author also, that you can read yourself. I'll send you this PDF. And then the theme of the story. You have understood now from the story and from the characters that this story revolves around an ill dog named Tricky and his mistress, Mrs. Pumphrey. The dog was hugely fat, his eyes were blood red and rheumy. Mrs. Pumphrey gave her malt cod liver oil and bowl of Horlicks. Still, Tricky had no energy. The doctor advised her to cut down on sweet things. Tricky left eating and kept vomiting. He was to be hospitalized. The doctor gave Tricky nothing to eat for first 2 days except water. On the third day, there were signs of improvement. He started taking food properly. The doctor did not give him any medical treatment. Tricky used to run around and play with the other dogs cheerfully. Soon he recovered completely. Mrs. Pumphrey continued inquiring about Tricky on phone. When she came to collect the dog, tears were shining in her eyes. She called this magical recovery a triumph of surgery. So, what we come to know from this story, the theme, actual lines which are missing in this, and this thing that it is only about the pampering of a child, and it is a message for the children as well as for the parents in this story, that we should not pamper the children. They should be given whatever is required according to them. So the story is of an over pampered and overfed dog. Clear? And in general, the author presented a light in a humorous way the story that brings out how some people ignorant of healthy way to groom their pets spoil their health, and some people treat their children in the same manner and regret it later. So the writer wants to make us clear that we should not over pamper our children, and they should be given the things accordingly, whatever is required. I hope the story is clear.